What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our SEC football channel.
We got Jackie Franchuli on the line to talk some Gators football with us. Jackie, how you doing tonight?
I'm great, Mark. How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine. Did you get a bit of a more of a heads up than the rest of us, or did you see this coming maybe a day early when it was just maybe a matter of time that there would be a cancellation of the game when we knew what the situation was within the Florida football operation?
So I started hearing rumblings a little bit on Monday morning about a possible outbreak. However, we didn't know the amount of players involved. I had only heard that one particular position group was hit really hard and that we were going to expect freshmen to start on the defensive side of the ball. So that's how this started on Monday. And then it slowly deteriorated. And it's kind of like how Scott Strickland talked about in his timeline, how when he first started, it was just, guys were showing symptoms on Sunday night and told the trainer that. And then the trainer told Scott Strickland, and they were still awaiting the results from those COVID tests that they took on Sunday, which is part of the SEC protocol. And then slowly on Monday, I kept hearing that the LSU game was in jeopardy. And I was thinking, okay, well, if you're just talking about one position group, this can't be just, we were hearing 5 positive cases, which aligned what we got on Tuesday, that first round of COVID positive tests. But then, we were hearing again saying, no, this is going to be worse than we expected. And that's when everything kind of went on its head on Tuesday, where we figured out that it was 19 confirmed positive cases at that point from the Tuesday positive case. The Alligator did a good job of reporting the actual number first, and it was 19 positive cases. And then Mullen today reaffirmed that those positive cases happened on Tuesday, and they retested on Wednesday. Those positive cases also included 2 assistant coaches from those 19 on Tuesday. And then Scott Strickland again today, after they retested, they actually had more positive cases. They had 21 players test positive. 18 of those are on scholarship, and also 2 assistants. So that's a lot of people now with a positive case. Now the problem, Mark, now is contact tracing. You got to figure out which guys were with who, and you got to see if you're on a line. You're obviously really atop of each other when you're practicing in the trenches. You obviously had some of these guys showing symptoms on a plane going to College Station, traveling together in a bus, traveling together on a plane, probably rooming together in the hotel room when they're on the road. So then that's contact tracing. That's when the problem kind of lied for Florida. They had less than 50 scholarship players available. And now the question now, Mark, will they even have scholarship players available come next week to Missouri? Because the problem is not the 21 players that tested positive, because those guys have 10 days, according to CDC guidelines, once you test negative. And I think the process is from start of the infection where you show symptoms to the end, they say 10 days. The problem is those guys that are kind of so singled out for contact tracing, they need to be isolated or in quarantine for 14 days. 14 days from exposure, which means if they were exposed on Sunday, Monday, guess what? They won't be available for Missouri. So the amount of players that involves, that's a problem for Florida. That means that Missouri game is in jeopardy. And honestly, if you do the math, it's turning into highly unlikely that will be played. So there's a lot of things that we're still monitoring moving forward.
So you threw a lot of numbers at us, and those are the numbers that I confirmed in regards to the number of players, the contact tracing, and so forth and so on, and the scholarship players. So the key number there in regards to, there's a number of numbers that could be pointed to that would cause a cancellation of a game, but right. the number, that 50 scholarship players, was the key one in regards to not having that many available that caused the cancellation, correct?
Right. So the SEC doesn't really have like a concrete mandate. They suggest, I believe it's I think it's 53 scholarship players or 56. It's either 53 or 56. But then they also require they suggest certain number of offensive linemen, certain number of defensive linemen, a quarterback, and they also suggest having 1 center on scholarship. So these are some of the guidelines the SEC did back, I believe, in August when they first said all these guidelines for continuation. And Florida just didn't have those numbers. We don't know exactly, which position groups were affected, because we don't know all the names. That obviously the players are not going to release the players. We do know there was one particular position group that was pretty much eliminated. So it is going to be an interesting thing of how they're going to handle this contact tracing and how that's going to affect Missouri. Again, some of these guys might turn positive in this couple of days. Don't forget the incubation period of COVID-19. I feel like I'm learning a lot about what incubation period means. It takes maybe 5-6 days for you to have symptoms possibly, and then some people might only have symptoms 10 days after. So it's going to be a roller coaster ride to kind of figure out if this Missouri game is going to happen. And then the SEC could possibly be scrambling to reschedule 2 games now. LSU and Florida is scheduled for December 12th at the moment. But, Missouri could be, also a game that they're going to reschedule as well.
So in the aftermath of a loss on the road at Kyle Field against Texas A&M on a last-second field goal that would normally be the talk of our discussion right here. Right. Certainly it was trumped by the cancellation of the LSU game and then the uncertainty and jeopardy for Missouri the next week. We got Jackie Franchuli on the line from allgators.com on the SI platform. So Jackie, I guess the only bright side I can come up with is it gives Todd Grantham and company more time to fix what's been a pretty bad defense.
It hasn't been the best couple of days in general for them. The defense has not had a good season, and plus all this COVID-19. When you look at that defense, you didn't expect it to be the way they are right now. When you look down that roster, Mark, we talked about this. This staff has done a really good job on the recruiting trail as far as recruiting on the defensive side of the ball. Now, I think one of the things that kind of bit them a little bit was something that we were praising them, was that they recruit players that are versatile and they can move around different positions. Now, at the same time, because they're recruiting versatile players and that can play multiple positions, I feel like a lot of players aren't being trained as an expert at their particular position. They're moving around so much, they're not becoming the best at that position. They're getting the job done or not even getting the job done in certain occasions. So I feel like sometimes because they're cross-training so much, they're not becoming experts in that position. You've got so many people filing in at star. A couple of years ago during the first week when Chauncey Gardner-Johnson was taking on first year of Todd Grantham, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson was at star and he did great, but he was the only guy at that position. Then Amari Burney was his backup. Then fast forward a year, Amari Burney moved to linebacker, and then they had the Trey Dean experiment. Didn't work. Then Marco Wilson took over that role. And then this year, you have a plethora of players playing that position. You had, Brent Stewart played that position and against Texas A&M. So there hasn't been that consistency. And then you put in the fact that Kyrie Campbell has not played yet this season. There's some uncertainty of when he'll be available or if he will even be available this year. And that makes that defensive front undersized. With them being undersized and then those guys in the front moving to different positions, then now you have a question, can they get pressure on the quarterback? Because they certainly didn't do that in College Station. They provided no pressure at all. I feel like, Helen Mond could go flip some pancakes and come back and still be able to catch 5 yards. That's how much time he had under center. So I feel like that's something that they need to do. And that secondary also, they're not positioning themselves well. There's a lot of questions when it comes to this defense tackling, letting those big plays happen on 3rd and 10, letting them stay on the field. There's only so much that the offense can do. And it's quite unfortunate if you're a Florida fan because you're watching probably one of their best offenses in probably a decade. And then it's now you're relying on the offense to remain perfect because the defense, keeps it off the field. I think there's a couple of fans joking that why don't you just kick an onside kick because it's probably have a better chance of getting the ball back. So that's quite, when you look at it, it is quite unfortunate for Florida fans when you finally have an offense who's producing so much. You look at Kyle Trask and Kyle Pitts and what they've been able to do this year. And you're talking Heisman quality performances. So I can see the frustration of people on the team, but as well as the fans watching this.
Yeah, no question about that. Another banner day for Kyle Trask, 312 yards, 3 TDs, no picks. And Kyle Pitts has 7 touchdowns receiving already in 3 games. So we'll leave the offense alone. We know it's a great offense. And we'll leave you with this, Jackie, in regards to there was much made of Dan Mullen's comments after the Texas A&M game about the fans in the stands causing some disruption and possibly impacting the game. And then obviously him wanting a full stadium. We'll leave that portion of it alone. But how did you interpret his statement about it just strikes most funny, as it did me, that a man who's been walking in SEC stadiums with 90 and 100,000 people for 15 years would complain about 22,000 people in a stadium?
When I heard him, I saw a man that was frustrated at what was going on the field. He was frustrated and he was looking for an out. And I feel like the crowd was an easy out. Now, don't get me wrong. I think he voiced it not in a best way. When he was talking about that, I thought he was going to approach and saying like the SEC should have a uniform rule across all teams about how much capacity they should have at a stadium, because they don't have that. They're saying basically each team or program can kind of say how many fans and what the capacity limitations are, as far as, if it's 20%, 25%. Florida has 17,000. Texas A&M has 25,000, I believe, is their limit. So I thought he was going to bring up that point. When he brought up Pack the Swamp at 90,000, that was probably the most ill-advised comment you can do in the middle of a pandemic. And then a couple days later, your team can't field the team because there's a COVID outbreak. Probably not the best couple of days if you're a man called Dan Mullen when it comes to that. But when I heard that comment, I thought he was going to talk about what he mentioned back in August. He actually had voiced this actual opinion that he wanted more uniformity among SEC guidelines across teams. He wanted stadiums to be about the same capacity. So I think when he said that, it was a man frustrated at what the defense was producing. It was 3 games in a row where the defense was not producing to the level they expected. So I get that. It's just that I think he voiced it in the wrong way, and I think he kind of buried himself a little bit, because it kind of kept going and going. And Monday he never really backed off of it. He kind of shaked off the question and saying that he was preparing for LSU rather than talking about that maybe he misspoke. And then he did kind of mention it, saying that he wants just a great game day atmosphere. Didn't say about Pack the Swamp on Monday. It took him until actually Wednesday during SEC teleconference to say, hey, I think I not misspoke, saying out of context, I think is what he was saying. It was more like, I wanted to say that we needed a game day atmosphere that was great, and I wanted a game day atmosphere where we can have more fans in, but also following local health officials and the U.S. health system. So he kind of backtracked a little bit, but it took him a couple of days, which wasn't the best look for Dan Mullen.
You can catch Jackie Franchuli's work at allgators.com on si.com. Jackie, we appreciate you stopping by. We may not see Florida football for quite some time, but hopefully everyone's healthy and safe and do the right things, which we know they will in the SEC with Greg Sankey's leadership. And we will see Florida football back on the field with a lot of important games, obviously, on the horizon. Jackie, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Mark.